Share screen. And is my screen shared there?
Nope.
No. Okay, 1 second. Okay. So,
oh yeah.
Is that shared now for everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh.
Oh, I know. Very professional.
Wow.
Hi everyone, this is our fifth webinar Wednesday. This one's on solidarity and inclusion. So we're really focusing on volunteering projects today and how it can help your project. I'm not sure if some people have been here before. We do try to make it as interactive as possible so that people can ask questions. If you have questions, you can either write them in the chat if you don't feel comfortable talking, or there'll be space at the end to chat as well. Just let you all know as well, this is going to be recorded and uploaded onto our Léargas website and maybe used for other training purposes. So if you're anyway a bit camera shy, you can turn off your camera or give us a shout later and we'll try to figure something out. I'm going to give you over to Anne, who's our inclusion advisor. She's going to give an introduction on how the day is going and etc. So I'm just going to share my screen and I'll give it over to Anne.
Right, so you're all very welcome. We're, as Carmen said, we want to, we're all learning a lot about online learning and stuff like that, but we do try and make it as active as possible. So do feel free to ask questions or either put your hand up or use the chat. So just you've met Carmel already, and she's coordinating the webinar. Carmel works on our training activities in Léargas. I'm Anne, I work as an inclusion advisor, and then I'm sure most of you will have met Nolene, who works on the European Solidarity Corps, which we'll be talking a lot about today. So we're talking, I suppose, about the link between inclusion and the Solidarity Corps and just how they kind of contribute to each other. So we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. Housekeeping sounds funny when everyone's in their own house. It's like, so the housekeeping for this is to mute when other people are speaking. Obviously the microphones are mute, so we don't have any extra noise. We have a tight time frame and we will try and keep to that. As Carmel mentioned, the recording might be used for other training purposes. You can put questions in the chat and that we'll take questions as well. There'll be an opportunity at the end. So our tight agenda for today. So we have tech support done, we have introductions done. I'll go through a bit about, I suppose, what we mean by inclusion in the programs. Then Nolene will talk a bit about the Solidarity course particularly, and I suppose that idea of what solidarity is and the concept of it within the program. So we're delighted to have two guest speakers. We have Natasha from Peter McFerry Trust, who will talk about her experience in working with the Solidarity Corps and sending inclusion volunteers. And then we also have Nicola from Finglas Youth Resource Centre, who will talk a bit about her experience. Because it's, we can talk about what the opportunities are, but to hear from someone who's directly has had the experience, we find is a more useful way of doing it. So we'll have Natasha and Nicola giving an input, and obviously it's important to have a bit of alliteration on your speakers, so we always try and keep them matching names, and then we'll have questions and answers at the end. Okay, so we're going to start. Can everyone open up the Menti, menti.com? I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So Is everyone okay before we start with the Menti? That is anyone having a problem getting onto that? I'll give you the number in a minute. You okay, Lillian? So it's only a quick exercise, so if it's difficult for you to get in, you won't miss that much. It's just to give an exercise where we're looking at kind of what it means. So inclusion has a particular definition, I suppose, in Erasmus Plus, and we want to kind of pull that apart, because we all use the word inclusion, but I suppose pull it and look at what exactly does it mean. And in the program guide, we have, which is like the Bible for the program, and sorry, it's the European Solidarity Corps, it should be saying here, but I just realized, sorry Nolene, but it's the same definition. So we have that the program aims at promoting equity and inclusion by facilitating access to participants with disadvantaged backgrounds and fewer opportunities compared to their peers. And basically the principle in the programs is that in transnational activities, any disadvantage that would limit or prevent participation in the activities. And that's what we're kind of focusing. So when we're looking at inclusion, it's what would limit or prevent people's participation in the programs, in either volunteering or doing solidarity projects. So we're going to do a quick Menti to kind of think of it, because if you type in this code, I'll just share my screen on the Menti. So if you could all fill in, just have a look at it and see what are the reasons that might prevent participation. Oh no, sorry Nolene, I've put in the wrong thing here as well. In the project. So it's, if you're thinking of young people's involvement in the Solidarity Corps, what do you think are the reasons that might prevent their participation? So if you could just put in on the Menti whatever you think, you know, there might be disabilities, there might be kind of big barriers, smaller barriers, they might not know about the opportunities, but what would be their more personal kind of barriers to being involved? And you can put in a few, you don't have to just pick one, put in as many as you can think of. Okay, we have about, most people have put in something, so we'll have a look at what people have come up with. So I always get technological. Okay, so I've done it up as a word cloud. Can people see the screen? So it's really interesting to see what's come up. The larger things, it's really interesting. So we've disability, lack of awareness, lack of confidence, poverty, accessibility, but you can see there's a huge range of reasons from, and a lot of them link, it might be long-term illness, lack of support due to having children, economic status, not the cultural norm, the education, confidence, economic obstacles. So you've come up with a huge range, and I think it shows the kind of the broad kind of barriers that are. So I'm just going to go quickly through the actual definition in the program guide of what inclusion is, and I think it's just to demonstrate how much it overlaps with what the things that you've brought up yourself. Because a lot of people might think that when you look at inclusion and additional support for participation, it might be for something very visible like a disability, when actually it goes much deeper than that. So I'll share my screen again. So the first one, and there's a kind of description in more detail of each one of these topics, came up in your Menti as well. You have disability, but that includes then, it's quite a wide definition. It's participants with special needs. It could be intellectual disabilities, a learning disability, even a sensory disability. So that's quite a broad definition. And it also includes what we're looking at, maybe young people with poor school performance, which came up as well. The next, I'm just going to put this on full screen. So the next one then is economic obstacles, and then the definition of that underneath is people with a low standard of living, low income, dependence on a social welfare system, homelessness, the young people born in long-term employment or poverty, people in debt or with financial problems. So again, a very detailed definition. These are European-wide definitions that are used. Then the next one we have is cultural differences. So the immigrants, refugees, or descendants from immigrant and refugee families, people from ethnic minorities, and looking at people maybe with linguistic adaptation and maybe cultural inclusion difficulties. So again, it's quite a detailed description. We also have health problems, so people with chronic health problems, severe illnesses, or psychiatric conditions, that could be a barrier. Social obstacles, and a lot of this will be the discrimination grounds. So ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, gender, age. It then looks at sort of people with limited social skills, or risky behaviours or antisocial behaviours, people in a precarious situation. I'm sure with the target groups you're working with, these are familiar terms, and you can think of young people that you work with that would come under some of these areas. So, and that came up in one of your thing as well, single parents, orphans, not a word we use that much anymore. But it's looking at any social obstacle that people have. And then finally, we have the geographical obstacles. So people from remote or rural areas, living in small islands or peripheral regions. But it also looks at then people maybe from urban problem zones that are less serviced areas with poor facilities, as well as the more rural and with limited public transport. So it's quite broad as well. So I suppose the reason I'm kind of going into that level of detail on what it means is just to show the breadth of what we mean by inclusion in the programme. And one of the good things about the European Solidarity Corps is that we do offer additional funding to overcome these barriers. And this is done through the budget on exceptional costs. And the idea is that, and we'll give some examples of that, but the idea is that if there is something that needs to be kind of purchased that can help that young person overcome their barrier to participate in the programme, then that's an eligible expenditure. And it's a very case by case, because it's obviously based on the individual. But we have had examples of, particularly with disability projects, that they would be quite significant funding to participation in a project in terms of maybe clinical support or particular equipment needed, but also even for young people if there's an educational barrier or confidence or mental health difficulty, if there would be mentorship or particular extra support in preparation and during the project. So it's really up to kind of organizations to come up with ideas, but I would say it's almost a kind of underused area of the program sometimes, that there is funding available, and the point of that is to overcome barriers to participation, and that it's really something to consider, that that's an extra tool for you in your work with young people to support them to take part in the projects. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I'll pass you over to Nolene now, who's going to talk a bit about the solidarity part of the programme.
Okay, hi everybody. You have to excuse me I was a little bit distracted while Anne was speaking, because I'm trying to contact somebody who should be here with us this morning, so sorry if I wasn't with you for the full session.
You missed the good bit, Nolene.
Yeah. So as Anne has said, inclusion and inclusion support in the Solidarity Corps it's a very important piece of the programme, and it's one that is underutilised. Organisations, I think, assume that when we speak about inclusion, that it's very specific to maybe young people with what we understand as fewer opportunities, but don't really go beyond that. Inclusion support can include things like if somebody is being sent on a volunteering project abroad and they don't have a passport, or they don't have luggage, or they might not have appropriate clothes. So all of the barriers that might prevent somebody from making a decision to participate in the programme, and the support is there. So just to, I suppose, emphasise that before I go on to speak about what we mean by solidarity itself. And this morning, I'm not necessarily going into the European Solidarity Corps from a technical side. So a lot of you who are here today, a number of you are experienced in the Solidarity Corps. Some of you are new. So for those of you who want more information from us, or who would like to come to maybe a discovery day or a project lab, we'll go into more of the technical details of the Solidarity Corps in those sessions. Really, this morning is about thinking around what do we mean by solidarity, and what does solidarity mean to us ourselves. And I think we're all fairly confident now that solidarity is more than just one word or one action, and it really refers to values, principles and beliefs, and it's much more associated with your own core thinking and how you react to things that might be going on in your community or in the wider society. The European Solidarity Corps Resource Centre recently carried out research on what do we mean by solidarity, and in particular what do we mean by solidarity in the European Solidarity Corps. So their findings, sorry, Carmel is controlling my slides for me, so
your lovely assistant.
Yeah, you're far ahead of where I should be, Carmel. You should be on the 4 pillars. This is going fantastic. As I was saying, the European Solidarity Corps Resource Centre carried out research, and they have found that there are 4 main pillars to solidarity, these being empathy, active citizenship, human rights and inclusion. And I suppose it's clear in the research that they found that empathy, active citizenship, human rights and inclusion are almost 4 threads that run through our thinking when we consider solidarity and what we mean by it. However, these 4 pillars are then underpinned by 7 principles or values. So it's the next slide, Carmel. And these are social justice, equality, support, community, participation, volunteering and responsibility. And we can see this in the European Solidarity Corps when working with organisations, that these very values underpin an awful lot of the work that the organisations we work with do. And yourselves, your own organisations, I'm sure you will identify principles there that are cornerstones to how you approach your work and how you approach your participants or your service users, and how you develop projects. So the Solidarity Corps itself then, the next slide, Carmen, please. It was very strange doing it like this, sorry, excuse me. So the European Solidarity Corps then itself as a programme creates opportunities for organisations to ensure that these very principles and values can be realised. It creates opportunities for young people from all walks of life to be involved in their wider communities and in the wider society. There are two strands to the Solidarity Corps. We have the volunteering strand and we have the occupational strand. And in both of those strands, there are additional practical support for organisations to apply for, in order to be able to involve people who might otherwise not be involved in either mobilities or participating, whether it's in volunteering or traineeships or jobs. So these are very practical supports, as Anne and I have already mentioned. They're really, the supports are about reducing barriers. We can't absolutely ensure that the people that you're trying to target or your target group will be involved, and the Solidarity Corps itself can't do that. But what we can do in the Solidarity Corps is make sure that the practical barriers are no longer a barrier, and that they aren't things that people need to think about. So Carmel, if you can scroll on there. So each strand of the Solidarity Corps comes with practical supports to ensure participation can be reduced. These supports are available in all strands of the Solidarity Corps. And the organisations that we have with us today are now going to talk us through their experience of being involved in the Solidarity Corps, and very specifically being involved in working with target groups that would be considered people who are generally excluded from involvement, and how these organisations were able to reduce the barriers for the people involved in the projects that they're going to discuss to actually participate and be full participating members in the project. So our first speaker today is Natasha from the Peter McVerry Trust, and I'm going to invite Natasha to talk us through a sending project that their organisation was involved in, but very much from the principle of inclusion and solidarity. So Natasha, can I unmute you? Yeah. Carmel, can you unmute Natasha? Carmel, can you unmute?
I think I can do it, so I'm a co-host, so.
You can only ask me to unmute.
Oh.
Okay. Actually, before, while we're unmuted.
Okay, I think it's unmuted now.
Yeah. Just before we move into this, had you any questions just on that, or any comments that you wanted to make just on that very brief overview of solidarity? And just to remind you, if you do, to put your questions in the chat, or if there is anything specific around the Solidarity Corps that you want to hear more about, just to put that into the chat and we can follow up with you. So if we're good to go, Natasha, you can take the floor now. So if you can just talk us through your project, Natasha, and why it was important to you, and what is it that you do in the Peter McVerry Trust as well. So.
Okay, so I am ESC volunteer coordinator in Peter McVerry Trust. And just to give you a bit of information, background information about Peter McVerry Trust, we are a national housing and homeless charity committed to reducing homelessness and the harm caused by substance misuse and social disadvantage. And I suppose we work a lot with vulnerable adults. and lots of our service users would be young adults who are coming from long-term homelessness. And I suppose additionally, we are also housing first provider. So I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Housing First initiative, but basically the main goal of this initiative is to reintegrate our service users back into the society. So I suppose why I'm speaking today is because we got involved in strategic EVS. That's how it was called, I suppose, 3 years ago. For some time before we got involved in strategic EVS, we were looking for an opportunity for our young service users to kind of give them a chance to feel empowered, give them a chance to feel like young people getting into adulthood, not like people who have fewer opportunities. You know, we wanted to feel them like that they have an equal opportunity, basically. And we wanted to give them a chance to be an active citizen. Okay, we wanted to make them feel like they are, for one time, they are, you know, the ones who are actively giving, and now not just, I suppose, passively receiving support. Okay, so that's why we're looking for some time for this type of initiative, this type of activity, program, project. And then around that time, the strategic EVS was launched, and we kind of thought like that might be something for us, something what we could get involved with. And therefore, like, we have a long time relationship with Léargas. We've been hosting organizations for many years, so we thought like, it seems like, you know, this is something we could get involved with. So we decided to, I think, originally to send, I think, 11 volunteers on 2-week placements to Poland in a period of 3 years. So we applied for the project, and kind of what made us really realize that this is really project for us. When we were applying, we're able to apply for really good financial support. Okay, and in our case, that means a lot. Because our service users, our potential volunteers would probably, you know, not take part in opportunity like that, and that could be one of the reasons. Maybe not the main reasons, but that would be something what could stop them. Okay, because they would be worrying like, you know, I don't have proper clothing, I don't have passport, you know, and I can't spend money on this. So I suppose whenever we applied for the project, we were able to apply for different exceptional costs. So we were able to apply for passport allowance, for clothing allowance, for you know, paying for things like suitcases, which in our case, it really means a lot. Okay, because our participants, as I said, might not have a suitcase, and that might be something, you know, what is, you know, quite important to go when you're going abroad, and in regular circumstances, something which you would not think about. But when you deal with people who have fewer opportunities, these little things become big things, which can really stop them. And I suppose another part which kind of came to our attention when we were applying for the project was that we were able to apply for advanced planning visit. And that again showed us that this is really something, you know, a project which really want to, you know, promote social inclusion for the people with fewer opportunities. Because we were able to send our volunteers on 2 days advanced visit with their either key worker or their support person. Okay, and they were able to go to Poland and kind of, you know, familiarize themselves with the role, with the organization they'll be spending 2 weeks with. Which again, in our case, our participants would come from long-term homelessness, and they very often do lack confidence in doing things like that. So it's really important to have this opportunity to go with somebody they know, and kind of check things out, basically, and kind of, you know, build the rapport with the hosting organization. And then we're able to also apply for complementary activities, and we were able to apply for training for our service users. Okay, so to kind of, you know, give them again extra support, and we're able to apply for training for the person who was going with the service user, to know, you know, to kind of support that person, because it is also a very unusual situation. So I suppose, yeah, that's kind of when we understood, or kind of when we saw that, you know, this extra bits really kind of make us understand that this is really an inclusion project which works for us very, very well, and which kind of really aims the people with fewer opportunities and give them chance to be, you know, involved in opportunities which they would, you know, not think of if they didn't have this extra support. And also it makes us kind of see that Léargas or European Commission, you know, with kind of coming forward with this type of project, really understands what might stop people from taking part in volunteering, you know. So I found that really, really important. And I suppose just to talk slightly about what impact it had on our volunteers who went abroad, it really boosted their confidence. And it even had impact on their family relationship, okay, because the families would be looking at it, well, if Peter McVerry Trust, you know, thinks you are ready to do this, you know, you have confidence in you too. I suppose just to give a simple example of how you know, how great this project is and how we found it important to our service users was with one service user, whenever we were kind of having meetings before her going away to Poland, and we're, you know, having few meetings just to kind of make sure that she feels supported before going. And I remember she said to me that she's really scared and she's really nervous, and she really, you know, she has lots of fears before, like, you know, before the trip, and he's not sure if she's going to cope with the whole 2-week volunteering. And she followed it up with, but I know it's okay. I know I'm scared, but this is normal. I have to get out of my comfort zone, and you know, and put myself out there. And this was amazing, because this was a volunteer who was, you know, coming from being really, really unconfident volunteer. So that was huge improvement in her, you know, abilities already before the project started. She was already kind of doing reflective practice, you know, performing reflective practice before the project, which was amazing. So I suppose, you know, the impact is big, even though it might look like, you know, it's something small, but you can see on your service user the impact is huge. And I suppose as a hosting organization, and what impact it had on us, sorry, sending organization, because you send them, on impact it had on us, we definitely learned a lot, and we definitely like saw our service users or the volunteers in a completely new context, I suppose, you know, and it learned us also that whenever we're taking part in a project like that, the volunteers will be a bit different to our hosting volunteers. We do 12-month placements where volunteers come and volunteer with us, and that's kind of really straightforward right now. With sending organization, I suppose, with sending volunteers, it just really showed us that there are different things coming into place you have to think of, which you would not even think whenever you deal with them as service users, but whenever they're volunteers going abroad, you have to add this extra layer of, you know, what can happen, what challenges we might have. So I suppose just to talk a bit about the challenges. As I said, we plan to send 11 volunteers in the period of time of 3 years. We didn't. We managed to send 2 volunteers. We still think it was very, very successful. Okay, the 2 volunteers went and spent 2 weeks in Poland. We had amazing hosting organization who also, I suppose that's really important whenever you send people with fewer opportunities, to make sure that you know your hosting organization and that they will provide really good support to the volunteer, because they need extra support and they need extra, I don't want to say emotional support, but it's not, you know, it's not only about finance, it's also about just being there and, you know, supporting them whenever they're doing their placement. So as I said, we didn't send 11 volunteers, we sent 2 volunteers. We applied to send volunteers to Croatia. We actually sent them to Poland. However, through all of this, I suppose what is really important to mention is also support from Léargas we were getting. If you're thinking about, you know, taking part in this type of project, Léargas is really supportive, and they helped us at each step. They were there to explain the budget all the time. I think at some point I had Léargas on speed dial and asking all the time questions about the finance, because it is more complex project to regular hosting project, because you have lots of financial support, but it is, you know, it might be very confusing when you're trying to use it. So, you know, to just make sure that you're using it right, you know, I was all the time calling Léargas, and they was super, you know, super supportive with explaining everything. And I suppose we had lots of fears whenever we realized we're not going to be able to send 11 volunteers, you know, and that was again amazing thing, because Léargas was like, it's okay, you know, we know you're working with people with fewer opportunities, and we understand that not always everything goes according to plan, and that's completely fine. So I suppose that was always this kind of nice support for us as an organization, you know, to know that it's okay if we're not going to do as well as we anticipated. So yeah, I suppose that's everything what I had to say about it.
Thank you. I think that very clearly demonstrates a project that absolutely had inclusion and solidarity at its heart. And just to, I suppose, let the group know that while Natasha applied for this under what would have been the strategic EVS programme, the same supports are available now in the Solidarity Corps. That aspect hasn't changed. It just wouldn't be a 3-year-long project. You would apply for your project year by year. And Natasha, can I just ask you a couple of questions that have come in while you were speaking, just to ask you one of them. What did the volunteers do when they went abroad? What were they involved in as volunteers themselves?
So we found an organization, a hosting organization in Poland, who worked with kids from disadvantaged background. So they would be involved in activities during school, like in school or in kindergarten, and they basically, you know, were, you know, doing things in there.
Great. I just think it's important for us to realise that this wasn't a special activities for somebody with fewer opportunities necessarily.
Oh no, definitely not.
Volunteers, and they went abroad with the additional support so that they could be fully participating volunteers as any other volunteer who would have done it.
Definitely the whole point of this volunteering activity was to make sure that our service user doesn't feel like our service user when they go, you know, to take part in this opportunity. What we wanted to make sure that we were aware there will be lacking confidence and that they need support, but we were not there, you know, to kind of take them by the hand and, you know, be like, you know, they were supposed to be, basically the idea was that they're active citizens and they're young adults, and that's it.
Okay, Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Natasha. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions and feedback on that when we get to the questions and answer section. Well, that was really informative. Thanks so much for that. Now I'm going to ask if Nicola Slowey is with us, and who is our second speaker. I've been a little bit distracted because I've been trying to contact her and I just wasn't sure whether Nicola had actually logged in and maybe her name hadn't come to the list.
I don't think so.
Sorry.
Oh, that's Nora. I don't
see Nicola, so it looks like maybe Nicola is having problems logging in.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to reach her, but Nicola was going to speak about a project in the Finglas Youth Resource Centre where they applied to send young people abroad on again, it was a short-term sending project, and it was aimed at young people who were described as having fewer opportunities, and it sort of goes against the grain for me to say that because it sort of almost says an awful lot in itself, but they were working with a group of young people who wouldn't have had, similar to what Natasha was saying, just wouldn't have had the confidence maybe to even consider themselves as being part of a volunteering project, let alone to go abroad on a volunteering project. And this particular project was for the young people themselves to be independent and to make the decisions themselves to get involved in the projects. And I know I'm speaking to Nicola over the past few days about this, the things that really made the difference for the organisation and for the young people to make the decision to become involved were the exceptional costs and the inclusion supports that were available in the programme. Things like being able to get a passport, being able to buy luggage, to be able to buy clothes that they would use when they were away. So things that if you aren't living in a socio-economic background whereby things like that are just part of your daily life and you don't have to think about them if you're going abroad. But if they aren't, they're huge barriers. And for a young person to put their hand up to admit that they don't have those things can be humiliating and embarrassing, and poverty itself can be humiliating and embarrassing. So if an organisation is working in the Solidarity Corps with Léargas and they have identified a target group who they feel need this additional support, and in Nicola's case, as youth workers, they would be skilled to build up those relationships with the young people, to start those conversations in a way that isn't embarrassing or humiliating or make them feel odd or different, but for them to feel comfortable to say, well, yeah, I would really like to go to Greece on that 2-week volunteering project, but sure, I haven't got a passport, and where would I get the luggage? And it's when you can then come back at those questions and say, well, actually, that's part of this, that's provided, you know, it's okay for you to need those things. So I think that's really the message that we wanted to get across today in talking about the Solidarity Corps. And I know that Natasha has spoken about a sending project, and Nicola's was also a sending project. The same supports are available if you're hosting volunteers. So if you're applying to host volunteers in your organisation and you have identified that they have additional needs, or that in order to include them, they're going to have to work through barriers or difficulties or issues, that there is a fund there to help you do that. Anne had mentioned earlier, particularly around people who might live with a disability. There's also, if you're bringing in volunteers and you feel that they need additional mentoring, or if there are volunteers coming into you who you feel need that additional psychological or emotional support, you can apply for reinforced mentorship. You can apply for those supports so that young people, regardless of what might be going on, now obviously your capacity to manage those young people also has to be part of your own assessment of your ability to provide a project for a young person. But all of that aside, if you have a project, if you have identified young people, if you realise that there are additional supports that they need, really what we want to get out of today is that inclusion and solidarity can work hand in hand. And if we are going to break down barriers and include people who don't normally have the opportunities that are out there, or that are in some way excluded from them, that by participating in the Solidarity Corps, you can actually reduce the practical barriers. It is there are practical answers to a lot of the issues that lead to exclusion in the first place. So that's my piece of pretending to be Nicola from the Fingal Youth Resource Centre. I hope she's okay. I'm a little bit concerned that she didn't log in, but anyway, we'll get there. And thank you for your time and for listening this morning. I know we're not completely finished yet, but just for my piece here, it's not what we're used to doing. It's certainly not how I'm used to delivering a training, and then a few added things going on in the background for me while I was trying to concentrate. So I hope that was all okay, and I hope you've heard something about the European Solidarity Corps that would whet your appetite if you're not already involved. For those of you who are involved, I hope it's whet your appetite maybe to consider the inclusion aspect of your projects. And for those who haven't been involved before, to get in touch and to come to our discovery days and our project labs in the future, and develop projects in the Solidarity Corps. So I'm going to hand you back over to Anne. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Irene and Natasha. I'm just looking, are there any other questions? I think there might be one or two.
There's one there from Bernie about how are volunteers that are experiencing barriers identified? Like,
okay,
so
I think it's for Natasha. So is it?
Yeah. So who's it? Who, or maybe for Nolene, or you?
Yeah, I think it's Bernie. It's really when whoever your target group are, when you're doing your own recruitment. So if you're recruiting volunteers and you're at a stage where you're not sure if they need additional support, it's asking those questions in a way that isn't embarrassing and isn't. Doesn't make a young person feel that, oh God, I'm the only one here who hasn't got X, Y, and Z, and everyone else in the room has. So if you're in a youth setting where you're working with young people and you're getting to know them and you've developed a relationship with them, it's in those conversations where things can come up. But if you're recruiting volunteers to, say, bring into your organisation as a host, it would really be at the recruitment stage where you can ask questions around if you need a visa to come to Ireland, there's support, and you could add into that, or if you need to renew your passport, there's support for that. Things like that, that it's put out there so it can become part of the conversation. But if you are targeting then a particular group of young people and you already know that there are barriers, that would be part of your work with them to try and overcome those barriers. So it's really at your recruitment stage, and I would suggest that during your recruitment and in your interview phase, if you like, that maybe you do an activity with the volunteers, maybe you have a conversation with them as a group of volunteers or applicants, where you can identify where people might not have access to things that we assume people have access to. I don't know if that's answered your question.
Yeah, no, it has. It was more from a hosting point of view.
Yeah.
I was asking, we've had some volunteers that have arrived and then I've identified they could have actually done with more support.
Yeah, and I think generally, Bernie, that can be in the psychological and emotional support. I think a lot of organisations would have come back to us over the years to say, look, we've recruited this young person, we didn't know that they had an issue with whatever it might be. So it's really having those conversations during the recruitment, and in a way that doesn't frighten the applicant, that they'll be turned down if they say, well, actually, yes, I had a period in my life where my mental health wasn't great, but I'm okay now. And it's really encouraging them to say that and say, look, if there is this going on, we can support you. This is how we can support you. We can give you additional mentoring. You know, we feel that maybe what you've said to us, you might benefit from having additional mentoring while you're with us. Now, it's different if somebody discloses a diagnosis, you know, at that stage. Then you as an organisation really need to review what support you can give to that person and put in a support plan, as opposed to just giving them some additional mentoring. But it's a very good point, and I think everybody who's in the room at the moment who've either hosted or sent volunteers, we all learn very quickly that volunteers are absolutely 100% human beings, and they're going to bring their life with them, whether they're coming to you or whether you're sending them abroad. So to be mindful of that, and to be mindful that there are supports for them on their journey as a volunteer, whatever supports that might be. So,
Nolan, do you think it's a good thing as well in terms of partnership with your hosting and sending organisation, that they have strong partnerships? So
absolutely, Carmen. Sorry, yeah, that's hugely important. Yes, absolutely. And to speak to in your case, Bernie, to your sending partners, because they're the people on the ground who will know those young people. So to have a really strong partnership. Your sending organisation, if you're hosting in Ireland, shouldn't just be a conduit to send young people over to you. They should be a partner. They should know the young people they're sending, and they should have a relationship with them, so that they can then let you know if the young person might need additional support. And the young person, if they have a relationship with their sending organisation, is going to be more open about things like that, rather than you as somebody who they don't know as the host interviewing them. So that's a really important piece of information. Yeah.
I can say from my own side that it is, like, I have to say that the relationship between the organizations, the hosting and sending, it's really, really, really important, and it has to be much more stronger than relationship which you have if you're just hosting, like, let's say, regular volunteers on your 12-month placements. I was on the phone with our hosting organization really a lot, while the volunteer was on a placement. They would be contacting me. Definitely, that's important relationship to have, and I would definitely recommend to have, confidence in the organization who is either, your hosting or sending organization, but, to know that, they will support volunteer, in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. I've just seen a question come in there asking about the timeline for making an application for a project similar to what Natasha had done, and the application process is the same as all of our applications. So if you're putting in an application to either send or host a young person on a short-term solidarity project, so a 2-week project, you applied for it at our deadlines the same way as you would if it was long term. So it's the same process, so that they come in the same deadlines. I don't see any.
But there's a question then on what is the age limit for participants, Nolene?
Yeah, it's 18 to 30. So adult. So once you're 18 and you haven't turned 31. So yeah. And while I suppose while we're concentrating very much on the volunteering strand of the Solidarity Corps in this conversation, there are also other opportunities, I suppose, outside of sending or hosting volunteers that very much address inclusion and solidarity, and they would be the solidarity projects. And some of you are aware of those, and some of you have been involved in them. And they're the projects that young people themselves, so if you have a group of 5 young people, they come up with their project idea themselves, they write the application form, they apply for the grant themselves, and that's a part-time commitment. So it's not that they're having to commit to this full-time activity. So a solidarity project can last anything from 2 months to 12 months. And the grant that's paid is to support that group of 5 people to carry out their project. So the project can be, and it literally can be on anything that concerns that young person's community and the wider society. So for examples of them, the solidarity projects that we have had come in, we've had numerous solidarity projects where young people wanted to get involved with working with people in their local communities who were living in the direct provision services, and groups of young people who just weren't happy with the way people living in direct provision seemed to be excluded from the wider communities. So they wrote projects where they could be involved with people living in direct provision, and for the people living in direct provision to get more involved in their local communities. We've had projects on the environment and climate change. We've had young people do projects on addressing mental health issues. So a group of 5 young people who wanted to interact with young people who may feel that their mental health was vulnerable, but not necessarily at a stage where they were ready to present to services. So young people having peer-to-peer support around mental health issues. So the solidarity projects really open up that whole community and grassroots aspect of volunteering and I suppose community activism and active citizenship, sorry, the word escaped me there for a minute, active citizenship. So consider them as well if you are working with people and with young people who you feel are maybe excluded. Certainly presenting them with an opportunity to develop a solidarity project can be a great way to build their confidence, and it can also be very empowering because the group of 5 people themselves can come up with the idea. You as an organisation can support them, so they can either apply for the grant themselves independently, or if you choose to support them as an organisation, you go on the grant application as legal rep. But you're just there to support them in that piece. The young people themselves will run the project. So that's just another aspect of the Solidarity Corps that doesn't involve the whole thing of sending and hosting, but certainly addresses issues of inclusion and solidarity and working with people who might be otherwise excluded. So if we...
Okay, I think there was just one other question about the age range, but I think that referred to a VET K1 mobility, which is different. So what we're talking about here is European Solidarity Corps, and that's the age range 18 to 30.
Yeah, 18 to 30-year-olds, absolutely, for the European Solidarity Corps and all of the strands of the Solidarity Corps, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any final questions? Have we answered everything?
I'll just ask, or not even ask, but just a comment to Natasha from Peter McVerry. Natasha, I was at a training with you a few years ago. I'm Emma from Cork Simon, and I remember you were talking about even just thinking about having that project, and I remember being full of worry and would it work? And it was the first time you'd done a sending project, and I just thought it was really inspiring to see how much that had come along and how well it worked out. And even for me, going back to my own organisation, it's given me lots of food for thought. So thanks a million, Natasha, for sharing that. It was really interesting.
Thanks for that, Emma. It's a project that I remember when it started as well, and it's certainly in my time in Léargas, I can certainly say that it's the first time that I have seen service users involved in volunteering as individuals, as volunteers with the same acceptance and rights as any other volunteer who's going on a project. So I think the Peter McVerry Trust absolutely, and it wasn't easy, it certainly wasn't. And I know Natasha, when she came into Peter McVerry and started working on this project, had lots of worries, but I think we can all, from what she has told us today, that project worked so well. And I don't think that we do justice, like as in Léargas ourselves do justice by just talking about it. And that's why I think it was really important for Natasha to be here today to speak about that, because they're the people on the ground doing the work, and Emma will understand absolutely the amount of work that went in working in the same sector. And in the homeless sector, people are marginalised and completely excluded from almost everything in life. So for Peter McVerry to have managed this project and for it to have been a success is hugely important, and well done to the Peter McVerry Trust.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to hear it as well, that idea of what you're saying about the active citizenship and feeling equal. So we're just coming up to 11:30, so we're at time. We're going to do, there's one quick just question about programs for teenagers. There is a European, the youth program within Erasmus, and the age group for that is 13 to 30. So have a look. We'll be running different webinars over different days, and some of them will cover the youth program, which will be covered in those webinars. I don't know, Carmel, do you want to say something about the next webinars?
Yeah, well, we actually have one with actually Nora, who's the participant in this one, but she'll be hosting one on non-formal learning in European projects, which might be a good one in linking in European projects with non-formal learning and youth work together. So that one's going to be next week. So please register.
Perfect timing. Yeah, so that would be the youth program is the teenagers. They tend to be group projects rather than individual ones like volunteering, and there tend to be exchanges, but that will be covered next week. Okay, so just as a final quick thing, we want to get your feedback because as I said, we're learning a lot about how these things work, and we really do want to get your feedback about what works, what doesn't, from your point of view, and also ideas for other topics that we could cover. So I'm going to put you back to Menti again. Share screen. Sorry, that's the wrong square. I'll call it out.
Up there, Anna, you share screen with us.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's 697791. So it's a few questions. If you can just let us know about the feedback on how you found the webinar. It could take a few minutes.
Could you share the screen there, Anna? I think at the top of it shows.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to move on to the next question on other themes or topics you'd like to see addressed. Do you have any ideas there?
And that's stop sharing there. Oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Great. Thanks everyone for all those suggestions. It's really helpful. Is there another slide, Carmel?
Yeah, there's a few slides there. So if you go to next one.
Okay. Oh, so anything that you found was less useful? And we really are open, you know, if there's anything, because we are learning about how to do these. Okay, we'll move on to the.
I know someone there as well had a mention about mental health and with COVID. So we do have a webinar on young people's resilience and mental health and online technology. So that one is happening. It's our last webinar of the series. So that's happening the 17th of June as well. So if you're interested to register, I'd recommend doing it sooner than later because it is nearly booked out.
We also have the peer support coming up for volunteers. So if any of you are currently hosting European Solidarity Corps volunteers who have stayed in Ireland, that peer support session is due to take place on the 5th of June. So if you could send me on the volunteers' details if you haven't already. And that really is to add that additional support for the volunteers who are either stuck in Ireland, who couldn't travel home, who haven't been able to do their projects and maybe are living in the volunteer house and can't carry on their activities or maybe working virtually. So just to let you know that that is happening on the 5th of June. And if you can, contact me as soon as possible with any volunteers that you think would benefit or would like to participate in that.
So no one's going on any summer holidays and happy to do online trainings over the summer. So just any other comments for the last one?
The event on the 5th of June are for any European Solidarity Corps volunteers that are currently in Ireland. So yeah, that was just one of the questions that came in there. Yeah.
We'll also be sending on any slides we have later on to you as well, and the recording will be on the Léargas website probably by the end of the week. So if you want to watch back or you have any questions or anything, let us know as well.
There's nothing on Netflix.
Recommendations on Netflix, and yeah.
I don't think we'll play nothing back again anyway.
So thank you very much, everyone. It's, you know, a very big change for us to be doing these things, so we really do appreciate your feedback, and it's great that you had so many ideas as well for future topics. So I'm sure we'll see you at maybe future webinars. Thank you for showing up this morning, and we'll let you go back to the lovely sunshine outside and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Take care.
very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. We'll stay on here for another like 2 or 3 minutes. If people want to ask any questions or
Sure, yeah.
you can stay on and ask us.
It was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Girls, no questions, just thanks a million. Like I'm a dinosaur on it, and generally I lose half of what's been said because I'm afraid I won't be able to do something. But you made it so relaxed that we got to, well, I got to enjoy every bit of it, and thanks a million.
That's brilliant. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Feedback. Thank you.
Over and out.
Roger.